Episode 78, Marketing Your Podcast.
Welcome to the PR Playbook Podcast, the only podcast giving you actionable skills and advice you need to execute a strategic PR program. Warning: what you hear next may lead to brand awareness and increased sales and customer exposure. Now here's your host, Rinjini Joshua.
Hello, and welcome to episode 78. We are finally here, marking your podcast. I know it's been a few weeks and have been waiting just anxiously to hear this episode. So I am going to make all your dreams, marketing podcast dreams, come true. I hope you know by now that patience is the key to developing a podcast. Nothing happens overnight unless you have a lot of money. A few people have asked about podcast marketing services and if they work. The short answer is yes, but you really have to be able to get to an inflection point when your podcast already has some traffic and some credibility before you get offers to advertise on your podcast and before you can really maximize those marketing opportunities. You really want to carve out your audience, and it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation sometimes when it comes to podcasting, which can make it really, really frustrating. So today I wanted to kind of talk about some organic ways that you can market your podcast. And I know we've had some podcast marketing companies on here. So there's those that you can turn to for paid marketing opportunities. But here are some organic ways. So first and foremost, ask your friends and family to review the podcast. This you want to line up before you launch. You can even give them a preview of it beforehand. And as soon as you launch, you want them to rate and write a review of your podcast. It's the easiest way to get into the algorithm of Apple and some of the other podcast players where other people will see your podcast because other people are listening and rating and reviewing the podcast. So get everyone to know to review the podcast. It is a lot more difficult than it sounds. You think, oh, it's so easy, people will do it. Often it's a little bit frustrating because it seems really simple, but you might have to promise some coffee trips. So get everyone to rate and review your podcast. 2, make sure you're optimizing your content on social. And this doesn't mean just posting your podcast on social media. You can actually chop up your episodes in like 10 different ways to leverage sound bites, leverage video, leverage images, and really get people to get interested. You don't always just have to post when your episode airs. You can reuse that post for another time as well to get them to go back to old episodes. So remember, podcasts are a living kind of breathing thing, but that doesn't mean that everyone's like tuning in every week. It's not a sitcom. So these pieces of content can live forever. You can use them whenever, you can promote at different times. Chop up your social media. There's some really cool tools like Canva is a great one. Get Audiogram is a great one. Creating audiograms is great. If you don't know what an audiogram is, it's basically where you have the picture, but you can hear the sound bite over it. And there's the little audio lines on there. So there's tools like Canva and Audiogram that can help you make that. It's pretty easy. I mean, it's kind of complicated to figure out the first time around, but once you've got a system, it's pretty easy. Or you can use social media agencies like Repurpose House. I use them for a little while and they're really, really good. They create templates for you and they create like 9 pieces of social media out of one episode. And so you can use that over and over again. You can use different pieces on different channels. You have a different audience on LinkedIn. You have a different audience on Instagram. You have a different audience on Facebook or Twitter. So, try to leverage that as much as possible. Social media is going to be your best friend. And so the more you post on your personal, your business, your Instagram, your Snapchat, wherever you want to post, even if you want to make a TikTok, all of those things are going to help widen your audience. And of course, leveraging hashtags within that. So you can create 15 posts just from one episode. And I'm sure I could create like 12 posts, in like about 30 minutes just from this episode. So just remember that. Send a newsletter. So by now you should have a landing page because we've talked about that. And on your landing page, you can have a newsletter sign up. And there's people I know it seems far-fetched that you're going to have fans, but after a while, people will hear your voice, they'll get used to you, and they may become a fan and they want to be notified. Send a newsletter. And if you don't, if you're not getting a lot of people signing up for the newsletter, if you already have a newsletter for your business or your personal brand or whatever, you can use that letter and say, hey, listen to my latest episode, or hey, if you did miss this episode, we talked about this. A lot of times what I like to do is send out themed newsletters and then attach the relevant podcast episodes to that. And obviously in PR, it's a little bit different. We kind of revolve PR topics and they're the same and they come back around. And so we can leverage old episodes for new content because PR is kind of cyclical. Excuse me. So just make sure to create a newsletter sign up, send out a newsletter every week, highlight old episodes. Like I said, these are evergreen, and try to make them evergreen when you can, because it really helps with the marketing and people can see that you have different types of content at different times. 4, cross promotion is key. And we've talked a little bit about this. Cross promote with other podcasters. So find podcasters that complement what you do and then be on their podcast. And they obviously are experts at this as well, right? So as you're becoming an expert, they're probably an expert. Cross promote their listeners with your listeners, and that will help you get a little bit more traction. So partner up with influencers and other podcast hosts. Influencers are a great way to go if they're not podcast hosts, but if they're people who like to post a lot on social, very, very active social presence, they probably have an active social audience. Or if they're not podcast people, but they do something else, then it's probably likely that they would be popular and their audience will want to listen to them on a podcast. So make it easy for them to share, keep them looped in on the timing, send them canned social media posts, say, hey, can you post this on this day at this time? Have them comment on your post as well, and you comment on their post, so that it shows that you guys are engaged with each other, you know each other, and that you're willing to invest in cross promotion and marketing. Number 5, submit your podcast. Submit your podcast everywhere. Submit your podcast to directories and listings everywhere. Many of these submissions are free. Just keep your eye on Google and you should be able to uncover podcast listing opportunities. And people highlight like business podcasts, enterprise podcasts, marketing podcasts. You want to be on these lists. Just Google it, reach out to those people, get on the directories and listings, and you should have a prime opportunity to get some additional eyeballs on your podcast. 6, keep making episodes. The key is to keep your podcast going. The more episodes and topics you cover, the more likely you are to widen your audience. Back to social media, leveraging hashtags, making sure your reach is as far as it can go. Make sure that you're doing the most possible you can. I mean, longevity is the key in podcasting, and sticking to it is really hard because sometimes you feel like you're talking to yourself. But I promise you, you will gain listeners. Keep at it. Make sure your content is interesting and use these 6 tips that I shared with you. These are free, organic ways to promote your podcast. Now, there are paid ways to promote your podcast as well. But I think if you don't have these organic ways and methods down, then even the paid ones are not going to be as fruitful. You can hire podcast marketing agencies. You can do paid ads on LinkedIn. You can boost your podcast on Facebook or Instagram. And you can even hire like short-term services that helps like review your podcast or comment or increase your listeners. But I would say if you don't do these 6 organic things first, you won't be able to get the most out of your money when you do decide to spend money to market your podcast. So I'll just go over them real quick again. Number 1, ask your friends and family to review your podcast. 2, make sure you're optimizing your content on social as much as possible. 3, send a newsletter. 4, cross promotion is key. 5, submit your podcast. And last but not least, 6, keep at it, keep making episodes, and good luck. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact me, Ranjini, at the Silver Telegram. I'm always here. I'm an open book. Be well, and can't wait to hear your next podcast.